What's going on, everyone? It is a new day, and that means a bunch of new spoilers to talk about. We've got some cool cards coming up, a bunch of discard shenanigans, and I am excited to dive in. A huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon, and let's get into it. Starting us off with a brand new leader in Sebulba. This guy looks pretty solid. So aggression villainy for this guy here. We've got an action, discard a card from your deck. A friendly unit gains raid 1 for this phase. Now, we've seen some brewing here with aggression in particular from the new set that allows us to potentially get some value out of this action in that the discard a card from your deck portion. Getting a friendly unit raid 1 is pretty solid. I mean, getting an extra damage in can be good, especially for those aggressive leaders out there. But it is heavy in terms of action requirement. Like, you have to use this, then you actually have to get in the attack with that unit in order to get that damage. So it can be a little bit slow, but raid 1 is decent. And if you do get another payoff on top of this from the discarding a card from your deck portion, this could be really good. Now, on a flip side of this guy, he deploys for 4 resources. 2/5 with raid 1. On attack, we discard a card from our deck. Now, again, this is something that maybe is going to be more powerful than we realize once we see more aggression cards that kind of fulfill this, maybe extra value from discarding a card from our deck. In terms of stat line, I mean, this guy is basically just Sabine, right? 4 to deploy, 2/5 stat line, same as Sabine. Sabine deals 1 damage to the base. This one has raid 1. So very, very similar. I think the 1 damage to the base is slightly better just because you can kind of bypass things that might temporarily give Sentinel or Sentinels in general to get the extra damage into base. And that is generally going to be more relevant for the more aggressive decks. Now, first off, I did not think they were going to make Sebulba a leader. It just didn't really cross my mind. I do love seeing that come in from FFG. I love seeing, leaders that are just really, I don't want to say out of the blue because they're part of the Star Wars universe, right? But just like leaders that I'm not really expecting. Sebulba is just one of them. Now, the really big thing about Sebulba is it's just like a really solid aggro leader. If we get more value from this action, I can see this being really strong. Like, we've already seen one card where if it's discarded from your deck, you get to do 1 damage. So if this action suddenly becomes consistently like action, draw a card, you friendly unit gains run. Or action, deal 1 damage to a unit, a friendly unit gains raid 1. Something like that, like some random additional effect, reasonably reliably, this can be very, very powerful. So we'll have to see with Sebulba. Who knows? Maybe Sebulba will be the meta leader here. That would be fun. But we've got some more cards from the aggression villainy standpoint. And as I said, aggression seems to be kind of focusing in on this discard a card from your deck type effect. We saw it with Vader as well. This one's a 2/4 in aggression villainy, 4/2 cost BT1. It's an underworld droid. It's got an on attack to discard a card from your deck. And if it's an aggression card, you may deal 1 damage to a ground unit. This seems okay. Obviously, this is really, really interesting for the decks that are really going to care about the discarding a card from your deck type of effect. If, again, like I said with Sebulba, this becomes a big thing, then you're absolutely going to want this on turn 1. Not only that, but this is also just a reasonable stat line. Like a 2/4 is totally reasonable. We've seen a lot of them over the course of the last couple of sets. Getting 1 damage to a ground unit is a perfectly reasonable effect. It can actually get you some value. Reasonably, if you're building around the aggression kind of vibe here, we can do like 70% of our deck as aggression cards. So yeah, absolutely, we can kind of play around this and get the regular value from it. But again, I'm not super excited for this card unless the discard a card from our deck portion becomes incredibly exciting. Again, 1 damage isn't a crazy game changer, especially if you're going to be fitting yourselves into a more aggressive strategy, which looks like the aggression cards from this set seem to be focused on. Next up, we got 000. This one's 3 cost ground unit in aggression villainy, 4/4 underworld droid. So a pretty nice stat line already. 3 resource 4/4s are almost good enough vanilla just to be playable. Now, this one actually does kind of work with the previous 2 cards that we mentioned, Sebulba and BT1. On attack, you may put an aggression card from your discard pile on the bottom of your deck. If you do, deal 1 damage to each enemy base. So this is basically just like Jesse. For those of you that are playing a little bit of Twilight Republic back in set 3 days, where we saw Jesse actually show up. But Jesse was a 3 resource 4/4 with raid 1 that made your opponent get 2 battle droids. Now, this one obviously doesn't have that downside and has the same amount of potential damage into the base. This is not a big payoff, but a payoff for the whole discard a card from your deck type of mechanic. And so if we're going to be finding ourselves in a situation where, we can, make sure that 000 here is going to be doing 5 damage to a base every single time it attacks, I mean, that is going to really, really wreck your opponent quickly. Very quickly. A 4/4 for 3. We've seen it with like Knight of Ren, the new Rebel unit. It's actually totally reasonable. And the card pool is shrinking. So I see this guy actually having some good things going for it. Next then, we've got Shadow of Stygium Prime. And this card looks absolutely nuts. Okay, I think this card's absolutely nuts. 4-cost upgrade in Aggression, Cunning, Villainy. Attached to a non-leader unit. Attached unit can't ready. And it gains when the regroup phase starts. Deal 2 damage to your base. That is insane. Absolutely insane. If you just think about this card in comparison to other burn effects, like 4-cause, for example, is probably the most common one. 3 resources for 4-cause. You get a little bit of deck filtering where you can kind of set up your next draws. Realistically, that's not a huge deal, though. Really, you just played 4-cause for the 4 damage into base. So in order to get that from Shadow of Stygium Prime, you have to play it on a unit. You're going to get the 2 damage at the end of the turn, so that's nice. And then you have to wait another turn to get the extra 2 damage, and then you're on par with the 4-cause. But this one's in dual aspect. It's 1 more extra cost, and you have to wait a little bit of time. But here's what it truly does. This acts as essentially a removal option while also dealing your opponent damage. This is a huge, huge tempo swing that also really puts on a ton of pressure on your opponent. Let's say you're in Aggression, Cunning, Villainy. Well, that's a very aggressive archetype. You're probably going to be hitting your opponent for a lot of damage. Let's say your opponent at any point drops a unit. Maybe it's a 3-cost unit, and you took initiative, and you just drop this, or let's say they play a 4-cost unit in Shadow of Stygium Prime. Whatever it is, when this comes down, let's say they play their 4-cost unit that turn, you can play Shadow of Stygium Prime on that 4-cost unit, and you've essentially removed it from the game until your opponent can either bounce their own unit, defeat the upgrade, defeat the unit, or, maybe swap the unit with one of your units. So what ends up happening is you've just killed their 4-drop with your 4-drop, and you've given yourself 2 damage per turn of clock for your opponent. Now, obviously, this is really bad against Upgrade Hate. Upgrade Hate just completely dumpsters Shadow of Stygium Prime. But in the absence of Upgrade Hate, this is extremely powerful. If you're playing a more aggressive deck and you drop this on a unit, it is going to be a complete tempo swing. Your opponent must deal with their own unit, and they can't actually deal with your units with the units that they just played because you've just made them permanently exhausted. This one has a lot of potential. I'm really curious about this one to see how it is in practice. As I said, it really fumbles to Upgrade Hate, though. Obviously, if you play this and your opponent plays like 1 resource to defeat an upgrade or something, you're like, oof, then it's pretty bad, right? You're just down a bunch of resources. It's literally what it happens. But I can see this doing some good work here. Moving on, we've got Sebulba's Podracer. Now, this card is somewhat of a payoff for the discard a card from your deck. Now, it is a 3-cost ground unit in Aggression, Villainy. It is a 3/3, so it's pretty unimpressive as a unit in of itself. And your opponents are just going to probably kill it as soon as they have the opportunity to, and they can oftentimes kill it with their turn 1 play. So all those things are kind of a negative towards Sebulba's Podracer, but here's the ability that is kind of intriguing. When you discard a card from your deck, you may ready this unit. Doesn't have to be an aggression card, doesn't have to be any specific card. It's just anytime you discard a card from your deck. So in reality, what happens here, you play your unit on turn 1. Let's say you're in Sebulba, right? You play a unit on turn 1. Next turn happens, you attack with that unit. Your opponent probably attacks with their unit. Maybe they have some other unit to play or whatnot. You play Sebulba's Podracer. You can then discard a card from your deck to give Sebulba's Podracer raid 1, and then just hit their base for 4 immediately. That's pretty good. Again, it being a 3/4 is really scary because there are so many things that can just immediately kill it, and you're just down essentially a resource in the process. If it was a 3/4, I'd be much more interested in this, and I think it'd be disgusting. Right now, it just looks decent. The BT1 obviously will trigger this as well. Any card that's going to be discarding a card from your deck will be able to trigger this. You could technically, pair this off with hopefully more cards that work with it, but we'll see. Sebulba, obviously the leader unit itself, this is intended for that. It looks decent. If we get more cards like this, I could really see Sebulba skyrocketing in value. We also got an example of all of the common bases in the set. So all of them have this type of effect where it's epic action to play a card from your hand. You get to ignore one of its aspect penalties. And you're going to see this across the board. Stygium, Spire, Aldani, Garrison, 27 HP base. We saw this with the Leia starter deck as well. And there is even a showcase little art preview there. But then we also finally got the last rare base that we need to talk about in Citadel Research Center. This one's a 26 HP base in Cunning. Its epic action is pay 1, you return a friendly resource to its owner's hand. If you do, you resource the top card of your deck. So you kind of get this like Bail Organa type effect. It's 4 less HP, which is a huge hit, right? 26 HP is pretty brutal. But you kind of get to draw anything that you've previously resourced. That's it. For 1 resource. It's okay. It is an epic action, which means you get to do it like 1 time. That's kind of rough. So you lose 4 HP. You get to draw whatever resource that you previously resourced for 1 resource. But you can only do it 1 time. Ooh. No. That does not seem good to me at all. Not to mention you're in Cunning already, which Cunning is a deck archetype or an aspect that typically doesn't want to be doing these weird like semi-value or like hold this card for me later type of deals. You want to be typically putting your pressure on your opponent, getting some tempo advantages. This is the exact opposite of a tempo advantage. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Citadel Research Center, but maybe there's some value. I don't know. Maybe someone see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then, lastly, we've got Interrogation Droid. I don't know if I said lastly for the last one, but this is lastly, I think. Interrogation Droid, 2-cost ground unit in Aggression, Cunning, Villainy. It's a 3/1 Imperial Droid. When played, you exhaust an enemy unit. If you do and that unit costs 3 or less, its controller discards a card from their hand. This was actually seemingly pretty good. So as a turn 1 play, it's kind of mediocre, right? You're not going to get the exhaust effect. You're not going to be able to go ahead and get the discard a card effect. You're not going to be able to get any of it. It's just going to be a 2-cost 3/1. If you play it on turn 2, let's say, this is where it starts to become a little bit more interesting. Like turn 2, if you have the initiative, you play Interrogation Droid, you get to exhaust their turn 1 play, and then you get to make them discard. Not bad. On turn 3, I think this is where it gets much more interesting, is you play the Interrogation Droid, you exhaust their 3-drop, make them discard, but then you also have 2 resources left over to play a 2-drop following up Interrogation Droid. This one seems, again, pretty solid. We've had Piet Red in the meta, and it's been one of the best decks in the format lately. This one seemingly will slot in decently well if we could maybe work around the aspect, or maybe it doesn't matter because you can play it for free off Invisible Hand. And maybe it's valuable just because you get to exhaust an enemy unit, right? Like, if you play this later on in the game, you don't get to get the discard a card effect, but you do get the exhaust the enemy unit effect. And that can be one of the most relevant things you can do for 2 resources on a unit in general, right? So I think this one's actually decent. I don't see anything wrong with it. It's just not really a turn 1 play. And that's what makes it a little bit more awkward. It's cheap, but it's not a turn 1 play. That's going to wrap up our spoilers today, guys. Let me know what you think about Sebulba and the aggression package. I'm really, really waiting and waiting for a card that's like, oh my gosh, we are here, guys, with this discard a card from your deck. Sebulba's Podracer is nice in that regard. What do you think about Shadow Stygium Prime? Again, I think if upgrade hate is not going to be prevalent, this skinning card is going to be pretty insane. And of course, we got BT1 and 000, kind of pairing with Sebulba and the aggression villainy package. They look pretty decent to me, especially that 000 getting that raid 1 type of effect, the 1 damage, plus the decent stat line. Got common bases, as I mentioned, this Sebulba's Podracer. Citadel Research Center. Am I missing something, guys? What are we cooking? What are we cooking? And of course, Interrogation droid. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you all for the next one.